Grease stained her hands, but her pride remained spotless. When a notorious Hells Angels enforcer dragged his sputtering Harley into a high-end suburban garage, everyone panicked. Everyone, except a brilliant 24-year-old mechanic. Fixing his bike cost her the job, but the explosive aftermath left the entire town speechless. The mid-July heat radiating off the asphalt in San Bernardino, California, was thick enough to choke on, but inside Pendleton Custom Cycles, the atmosphere was strictly climate-controlled and sterile. This was not a gritty, roadside chop shop. Arthur Pendleton had built his business catering to wealthy tech executives, doctors, and lawyers who wanted to play at being outlaws on the weekends. The shop floor was pristine. The tools were organized with surgical precision, and the coffee in the waiting area was imported. At the back of the shop, hidden from the pristine showroom floor, was Maya Jefferson. At 24, she was a paradox in Arthur's perfectly curated world. She was a young black woman in a fiercely male-dominated industry, possessing a raw, innate genius for internal combustion that no expensive certification could teach. Maya had grown up stripping down engines in her late father's dusty backyard garage in Vallejo. She didn't just fix motorcycles, she listened to them. She understood the mechanical heartbeat of a machine. But to Arthur Pendleton, she was cheap labor, kept out of sight because she didn't fit the upscale aesthetic he sold to his wealthy clientele. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the perfectly manufactured piece of the shop was shattered. It started as a low, irregular rumble in the distance, quickly escalating into a violently sputtering backfire that shook the large plate glass windows of the showroom. Every mechanic, salesman, and customer in the building froze. Pulling into the pristine driveway was a heavily modified, murdered-out Harley-Davidson Dyna. It was leaking oil, coughing thick black smoke, and sounding like a wounded beast. But it wasn't the dying motorcycle that made the color drain from Arthur Pendleton's face. It was the man riding it. He was a mountain of a man, clad in worn, road-scarred leather. On his back, the unmistakable, instantly recognizable Wing Death's head patch stared out at the terrified onlookers. Above it, the top rocker read Hells Angels, and the bottom rocker proudly declared California. This wasn't a weekend warrior in a store-bought leather jacket. This was a fully patched, 1%er member of the most notorious motorcycle club in the world. His name was Wyatt Price. Known on the streets as Iron Wyatt, he was a revered enforcer for the local charter. He kicked the kickstand down with the heel of a heavy, scuffed boot and stepped off the dying machine. The engine gave one final, pathetic wheeze and died completely. Wyatt pulled off his helmet, revealing a sharp, weathered face, cold gray eyes, and a thick beard. He looked around the pristine shop with a mixture of desperate urgency and clear disdain. Arthur Pendleton, trembling slightly, stepped out of his air-conditioned office. He smoothed his polo shirt, trying to muster a courage he did not possess. I'm sorry, sir," Arthur stammered, holding up his hands defensively as Wyatt approached the open bay doors. "We are completely booked. We don't take walk-ins. You'll have to tow it somewhere else." Wyatt didn't even blink. He reached into his leather vest, a movement that caused two of the younger mechanics to physically take a step back. But he didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills. "I don't need a reservation." Wyatt's voice was like gravel grinding against steel. "My timing is completely shot, and the carb is flooded. I have a mandatory run in 45 minutes. If I miss it, it's my patch. You're going to fix it right now, and I'm going to pay you whatever you want." "We simply can't," Arthur insisted, his voice pitching higher. The reality was, Arthur was terrified. The presence of a Hells Angel in his shop contradicted his entire business model. He was terrified of the association, terrified of the police attention, and terrified of the man himself. "My insurance. The liability. We don't work on bikes of this nature." Wyatt took a step forward, towering over the shop owner. The air in the garage grew suffocatingly dense. "It's a Harley, not a spaceship. Fix it." "I'm telling you to leave," Arthur said, his voice cracking, backing away toward the safety of his office phone. "Or I will call the police." A dangerous shadow crossed Wyatt's face. He knew the police wouldn't help him, They would only complicate his already dire situation. He looked at his bike, genuinely stranded. The imposing enforcer suddenly looked incredibly trapped. "Step aside, Arthur." The calm, feminine voice cut through the heavy tension like a scalpel. Everyone turned to see Maya wiping grease from her hands onto an old rag. She stepped out from the shadows of the back bays, her dark eyes locked not on the terrifying biker, but on the smoking Harley. "Maya, get back to work. This doesn't concern you," Arthur hissed, his face flushing violently red. Maya ignored him. She walked straight past the trembling shop owner and stopped right in front of Wyatt Price. Wyatt looked down at her, his cold eyes narrowing. She barely came up to his chest, wearing oil-stained coveralls and a faded bandana holding back her dark hair. "Start it up," Maya said, her voice steady and commanding. Wyatt hesitated for a fraction of a second, then swung his heavy leg back over the bike. He hit the starter. The bike groaned, screeched, and let out a deafening pop, spitting a flame from the exhaust before dying again. Maya closed her eyes for a second, listening to the dying echoes of the engine block. "Your timing isn't just shot," she said, opening her eyes and looking directly into Wyatt's hardened face. "Your push rods are out of adjustment. You've blown the intake manifold seal, and your S&S Super E carburetor is running so rich it's drowning the spark plugs. It's a miracle you made it this far." Wyatt's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. She had diagnosed a complex cascade of mechanical failures just by listening to it choke for 3 seconds. "Can you fix it?" Wyatt asked, the hostility in his voice replaced by a desperate glimmer of hope. "I have 40 minutes. Maya, if you touch that bike, you are fired," Arthur screamed from the safety of the showroom doorway. "I will not have gang members bringing heat to my business." Maya didn't even look back at her boss. She looked at Wyatt. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the absolute necessity of the machine to the man. To Maya, a broken bike was a broken bike, regardless of the patch on the rider's back. "Pull it into Bay 4, Maya said to Wyatt, "and stay out of my way." The next 35 minutes were a masterclass in mechanical warfare. Maya moved with a blur of practiced, almost violent efficiency. Wyatt stood, leaning against a pristine toolbox, silently watching her work. He had been around mechanics his entire life, crusty, bearded men who cursed and threw wrenches, but he had never seen anything like this. Maya didn't waste a single motion. She stripped the air cleaner off the side of the engine in seconds. With nimble, grease-covered fingers, she recalibrated the S&S carburetor, adjusting the mixture screws by pure instinct and feel. She replaced the blown manifold seal, her small hands navigating the tight spaces around the Evo engine that larger men struggled with. "You're running too hot," Maya mumbled around a flashlight held between her teeth as she adjusted the push rods. Whoever tuned this last advanced the timing too much, trying to squeeze out extra horsepower. "It was cooking your engine from the inside out." "That was me," Wyatt admitted, a rare hint of embarrassment in his gruff voice. Maya pulled the flashlight from her mouth and shot him a deadpan look. "Stick to riding, Wyatt. Leave the wrenches to the professionals." Wyatt let out a short, barking laugh. It was the first time he had smiled all day. The rest of the shop staff watched in stunned silence from a safe distance. No one spoke to a Hell's Angel like that. But Maya was entirely in her element, completely immune to the intimidation tactics that worked on everyone else. With 5 minutes left on Wyatt's ticking clock, Maya tightened the last bolt on the spark plug covers. She tossed a wrench onto her metal cart with a loud clatter. "Fire it," she commanded, wiping sweat from her forehead. Wyatt swung onto the saddle. He turned the ignition and hit the switch. The Harley roared to life. It wasn't the sputtering, agonizing cough from before. It was a deep, resonant, terrifyingly powerful roar. The idle was incredibly smooth, a perfect, rhythmic lope that shook the floorboards in the best way possible. Wyatt revved the throttle. The engine responded instantaneously, aggressive and flawless. A massive grin broke through Wyatt's thick beard. He killed the engine and stepped off. He didn't just hand her the wad of cash. He peeled off 10 $100 bills and pressed them directly into Maya's greasy palm. "The repair is only $300, Maya said, trying to hand the rest back. "Keep it," Wyatt insisted, his hand closing over hers. He looked her dead in the eye, the coldness entirely gone, replaced by profound respect. You didn't just fix my bike, kid. You saved my life today. If I need a wrench again, I'm coming to you. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small embossed business card. It had no name, just a phone number and a small red-winged death's head logo. If you ever need anything. And I mean anything, you call that number. Maya pocketed the card and the cash with a nod. Wyatt fired up the Harley and roared out of the driveway, hitting the street with a thunderous blast of speed, easily making his meeting time. The silence he left behind in the garage was deafening. Maya picked up her rag and turned around, fully expecting to get back to the brake job she had been working on before the interruption. Instead, she found Arthur Pendleton standing inches from her face, shaking with absolute, unadulterated rage. "Pack your tools," Arthur spat, his voice trembling so violently he could barely form the words. Maya stopped. "Arthur, the repair is done. I handled it. He paid cash. It's over." "It is not over!" Arthur screamed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings of the shop, drawing the attention of every employee and customer. "Do you have any idea what you just did? You just associated Pendleton Custom Cycles with the Hells Angels. You brought criminal cartel heat to my doorstep." "I fixed a broken motorcycle," Maya countered, her own temper flaring. She stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated by the red-faced owner. "We are mechanics. That's what we do." And he paid $1,000 for a $300 job. "I don't care about the money," Arthur yelled, sweeping a hand through his thinning hair. "My clients are judges. They are state senators. If word gets out that we serve as 1% ER Club members, my business is ruined. I explicitly told you not to touch that bike, and you openly defied me in front of my entire staff." Maya gritted her teeth. She knew Arthur was a coward, but she hadn't expected him to be this fragile. "Arthur, be reasonable. He was stranded. He would have torn this place apart if you tried to force him out. He is a thug. And you," Arthur jabbed a finger hard into Maya's shoulder, "are an insubordinate, arrogant liability. I only hired you because it looked good for my diversity metrics, but I am done hiding you in the back room. You are fired. Effective immediately." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs. "Arthur, please, you can't do this. I need this job." The defiance in Maya's eyes cracked, replaced by sudden, desperate panic. Arthur didn't know that Maya's younger brother, Leo, was in a specialized physical rehabilitation facility after a severe car accident. He didn't know that Maya's meager paycheck barely covered the monthly copays, and that she was 2 weeks away from being evicted from her late father's house. She had swallowed her pride and endured Arthur's condescension for 2 years, specifically because the health insurance benefits kept her brother in treatment. "That sounds like a personal problem," Arthur sneered, feeling brave now that the biker was gone. The power dynamic had shifted back in his favor, and he was reveling in it. "Get your toolbox and get off my property. Now." "What about my final paycheck?" Maya demanded, her voice shaking with unshed tears of frustration. "I worked 60 hours this week." Arthur crossed his arms. "I'm withholding it to cover the potential damages to my shop's reputation. Consider it a severance penalty. If you try to fight me, I'll tie you up in court for years with my lawyers. You have 10 minutes to get off my property before I call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing." Maya looked around the shop. The other mechanics men she had helped, men whose mistakes she had covered up, all looked away. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody defended her. A cold, hard knot formed in Maya's stomach. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She turned around, grabbed the handle of her heavy red rolling toolbox, and began the long, humiliating walk down the center aisle of the shop. Every clack of the wheels on the pristine concrete felt like a hammer blow to her chest. She rolled her tools out into the brutal afternoon heat. As she reached the sidewalk, the sky broke open, and a sudden, violent summer downpour began to fall, washing the grease from her hands, but soaking her to the bone. She stood on the curb, utterly alone, fired, broke, and terrified for her brother's future. She reached into her pocket to pull out her car keys, and her fingers brushed against a piece of thick cardstock. Maya pulled out the small business card Wyatt had given her. The rain beaded off the embossed red logo. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything. Maya looked back at the gleaming, arrogant facade of Pendleton Custom Cycles. Arthur thought he had won. He thought he had crushed her. With a trembling, grease-stained thumb, Maya dialed the number. The phone rang exactly 3 times before a gruff, gravelly voice answered over the background noise of clinking glasses and heavy rock music. Yeah? Maya stood in the pouring rain, the water matting her dark hair to her face. She shivered, her grip tightening on her cell phone. Wyatt? It's Maya, the mechanic from Pendleton's. The background music on the other end of the line was instantly muted. The heavy, intimidating silence that followed made Maya's heart pound against her ribs. I remember, Wyatt's voice came back, stripped of its previous casualness. It was sharp, focused, and dangerously quiet. Why are you calling me, kid? Are you in trouble? I got fired, Maya said, her voice cracking despite her best efforts to remain stoic. The second you rode off the lot, Arthur fired me for working on your bike. He told me I was a liability and a thug sympathizer. She took a deep, shaky breath, wiping a mix of rain and angry tears from her cheeks. But that's not why I'm calling. He's keeping my final paycheck. He said it's a severance penalty for damaging his reputation. My little brother is in a rehab facility, Wyatt. I need that money for his medical bills, or he gets discharged next week. Arthur threatened to bury me in court if I fight him. I don't know any lawyers. You said if I needed anything. There was a long pause on the line. Maya could hear the faint sound of a heavy, lighter striking, followed by a long exhale. Where are you right now? Wyatt asked. Standing on the sidewalk outside the shop, in the rain. Go home, Maya, Wyatt instructed, his tone entirely unreadable. Get out of the rain. Go be with your brother. Don't call the cops, don't call a lawyer, and don't call Arthur. But my money. I said, I will handle it, Wyatt interrupted, the absolute authority in his voice leaving no room for argument. You saved my patch today. The Hells Angels do not forget a debt, and we do not tolerate a friend of the club being extorted by a coward in a polo shirt. Go home, keep your phone on. The line went dead. The next morning dawned bright and incredibly humid. Inside Pendleton Custom Cycles, Arthur was in excellent spirits. He had already called a local community college and hired a young, inexperienced intern at minimum wage to replace Maya. In Arthur's mind, he had successfully purged a problem and asserted his dominance. The showroom floor was gleaming, and 3 of his wealthiest clients, including a prominent local judge and a wealthy real estate developer, were browsing the custom chrome accessories. At exactly 11 a.m., the overpriced espresso machine on the customer counter began to vibrate. It started as a low, resonant hum vibrating through the polished concrete floor. Within seconds, the hum escalated into a deafening, chest-rattling roar. It sounded as if a low-flying cargo plane was landing directly on the roof. Arthur's smug smile vanished. He rushed to the massive plate glass window, pulling aside the blinds. The blood instantly drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. It wasn't just Wyatt Price. It was an absolute invasion. Rolling down the pristine, tree-lined suburban avenue in perfect, staggered formation were 24 fully patched members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The morning sun gleamed off chrome pipes, custom paint jobs, and the terrifying uniform death's head patches on their leather vests. The sheer volume of the V-twin engines echoing off the upscale storefronts was physically overwhelming. They didn't speed. They didn't break a single traffic law. They moved with a terrifying, organized discipline. The pack signaled and turned into the parking lot of Pendleton Custom Cycles. They systematically backed their heavy machines into every single available parking space, completely surrounding the building in a barricade of American steel. The wealthy clients inside the showroom froze in absolute terror. The young intern dropped a wrench, the sharp clang completely lost in the thunder of the engines being cut off in unison. The silence that followed was somehow heavier and more intimidating than the noise. Wyatt Iron Price stepped off his Dyna, pulling off his leather gloves. He was flanked by two men who looked like they benched small cars for a warm-up. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't yell. They simply walked toward the front doors with the casual, heavy confidence of apex predators entering a cage of mice. The glass doors slid open, and the smell of hot exhaust, leather, and impending doom washed over the air-conditioned showroom. "Arthur," Wyatt said, his voice booming through the silent shop, "we need to have a little chat about human resources." Arthur backed up so fast he collided with a display of imported leather gloves, sending them scattering across the floor. You can't be here," he stammered, his hands shaking violently as he reached for his cell phone. "I am calling the police! This is trespassing." One of Wyatt's massive companions, a heavily tattooed man named Jackson, calmly stepped forward and placed his large, calloused hand entirely over Arthur's phone, lowering it. "No one is trespassing, Artie," Jackson smiled, though his eyes remained entirely dead. "We're potential customers, just browsing the chrome." Wyatt walked right up to the counter, invading Arthur's personal space until the shop owner was pinned against the cash register. "You made a mistake yesterday, Arthur," Wyatt said softly, loud enough only for Arthur and the terrified clients nearby to hear. "You disrespected a woman who did you a favor. But more importantly, you stole from her. You withheld wages from someone who kept this overpriced boutique running." "That is a civil matter," Arthur squeaked, sweat pouring down his forehead. "She broke company policy." "The club doesn't care about your policies," Wyatt replied, leaning his heavy forearms on the glass counter. It audibly creaked under his weight. "We care about respect. Maya Jefferson is officially under the protection of the California Charter. You owe her a final paycheck. I suggest you cut that check right now, with a bonus for emotional distress." Arthur's hands were shaking so violently he could barely unlock his desk drawer. He pulled out the company checkbook, terrified that if he hesitated, these men would tear his pristine shop down to the studs. How much?" Arthur whispered, his bravado entirely broken. $3,000, a clear, feminine voice rang out from the front door. Every head in the showroom turned. Stepping through the glass doors, flanked by two more Hell's Angels, was Maya. She wasn't wearing her grease-stained coveralls today. She wore dark jeans, heavy boots, and a leather jacket, looking entirely composed and utterly fearless. Wyatt had sent a prospect to pick her up from her house in a club-owned truck, ensuring she arrived in time to watch the empire fall. Maya walked directly up to Arthur, ignoring the staring wealthy clients who had previously never given her a second glance. $3,000 covers the 60 hours you owe me, plus the sick leave I accrued, plus the penalty for withholding it," Maya said, her eyes locked onto her former boss. "Write it." Arthur frantically scribbled the numbers, signed the check, and slid it across the glass. "There, take it. Now get these animals out of my shop." Maya picked up the check, folded it neatly, and slid it into her pocket, but she didn't turn to leave. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a battered, grease-stained spiral notebook. "The money covers what you owe me, Arthur," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent showroom. "But what about what you owe them?" She gestured toward the wealthy clients standing paralyzed near the window. Arthur's face morphed from pale fear to utter, desperate panic. "Maya, shut your mouth. We have a deal. You got your money." "No deal," Maya said coldly. She flipped open the notebook. "Mr. Sterling, the real estate developer," she said, looking directly at the man by the window. "3 weeks ago, Arthur charged you $4,000 for a high-performance S&S engine rebuild, right?" The developer blinked, startled. "Yes, it's on my invoice." "He never bought the parts," Maya revealed, tapping the ledger. "He had me take your stock Harley parts, put them in a chemical wash, polish the casings, and reinstall them. He pocketed the $4,000. You are riding on the exact same engine you came in with." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Arthur lunged over the counter to grab the notebook, but Wyatt simply put a heavy hand on Arthur's chest and shoved him backward effortlessly. "And Judge Harrison," Maya continued, turning the page, "your brake failure last month? Arthur blamed it on aggressive riding. He charged you for top-of-the-line Brembo calipers. He actually ordered cheap, uncertified knockoffs from a wholesale website and made me grind off the serial numbers so you wouldn't know. The judge's face turned violently purple. You put my life at risk to save $300? The judge roared, stepping forward, his fear of the bikers entirely eclipsed by his outrage. I have it all documented, Maya said, holding the notebook up. Every fraudulent upcharge, every counterfeit part. Every time he told me to cut a corner that put a rider's life in danger just to pad his margins. I kept a record because I knew one day he'd try to throw me under the bus. Wyatt looked down at Maya, a massive grin splitting his bearded face. The kid wasn't just a mechanical genius. She was a tactical nuke. You're ruined, Pendleton. Judge Harrison spat, pulling out his cell phone. I am calling the state attorney's office. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be answering to a grand jury for wire fraud and reckless endangerment. Arthur collapsed into his expensive leather desk chair, putting his head between his knees, hyperventilating as his entire world crumbled around him. His pristine reputation, his wealthy clientele, his entire fraudulent empire burned to the ground in less than 10 minutes by the girl he had kept hidden in the back room. Wyatt nodded to his men. Show's over, boys. Time to ride. As the Hells Angels filed out of the shop, leaving Arthur to the wrath of his defrauded clients, Wyatt put a heavy hand on Maya's shoulder and guided her out into the bright California sun. The thunder of the engines starting up again shook the glass doors. You handled yourself well in there, kid, Wyatt said over the rumble. Your brother's bills are covered? They will be once this clears, Maya said, tapping her pocket. But I still need a job. Wyatt reached into his leather vest and pulled out a heavy set of brass keys. He tossed them through the air, and Maya caught them instinctively. The club owns an abandoned commercial garage down on 4th and Elm, Wyatt said, putting his sunglasses back on. It needs a lot of cleaning, and the lift is ancient, but the bones are good. It's yours. 6 months rent-free to get it off the ground. Maya stared at the keys in absolute shock. Wyatt, I can't accept this. Why are you doing this? Wyatt swung a heavy leg over his Dyna. Because my club needs a mechanic who knows a supercharger from a toaster oven and who won't sell us out. You open your doors, and every patched member in this state will bring their business to you. You'll never have to answer to a suit like Arthur Pendleton again. He hit the starter, the beautifully tuned engine roaring to life with flawless precision. See you around, boss. 6 months later, Jefferson Custom Works opened its massive bay doors to the public. It wasn't sterile or climate-controlled. It smelled beautifully of rich oil, gasoline, and hard work. But it became the most successful, highly respected shop in San Bernardino. Wealthy weekend warriors and hardcore 1%ers alike lined up down the block, united by one single, undeniable fact. If you wanted your machine treated right, you took it to the best. You took it to Maya. If this story of Maya standing up to corporate greed and finding an unexpected brotherhood with the Hells Angels kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this incredible true-to-life drama with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories where the underdogs win and karma hits harder than a Harley engine. Drop a comment below on what you would do in Maya's shoes.